Hey, what's up? Ryan K here. Welcome back to the I Want to Work For You podcast. Today, I've got an amazing employer in the construction world that I want to introduce you to. We're going to have a lively conversation about what they have to offer, what it's like to work there, what their culture and values, benefits and perks are, kind of their mission and vision, and honestly, just to give you kind of a bird's eye view into why their employees love working for them. So, check it out. All right, welcome back to the I Want to Work For You podcast. Ryan here, and we have got special guest Ashley from the Wesson Group. Super interesting, kind of upstate New York company that does construction, but specifically construction in some of the renewable energy space, solar and wind and all kinds of good stuff. I'm sure she'll give us a quick elevator pitch. So thanks, Ashley, so much for jumping on here today.
Thanks, Ryan, for having me. I'm excited to share a little bit about my experience and our company and some of the great things that we have to offer.
Well, perfect. Maybe to kick things off, like give us the elevator pitch. What exactly does Wesson do?
Yeah, so we are a construction company, but we're in renewable energy. So focused on the infrastructure of wind and solar farms.
Okay.
So we do play in the dirt. We have equipment and we build some really cool things. But we are still focused on sustainability. And what does that mean to you and to us? Sustainability in projects. We want projects that are going to help the environment, but also that are going to be sustainable for your career. We want your career to develop so that life is sustainable for you and your family. So we really try to carry that trend through, and we want to work with people who have the same beliefs as us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think solar is interesting from a solar farm standpoint, just how quickly and the sheer quantity of space being used in solar. I'm just 2 hours north of Vegas. And man, Vegas is just before and after Vegas is just desert that is like growing with solar activity. But New York is interesting as far as like solar and wind. So a lot of the projects and the farms you're building are up there in New York State. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're northern New York. We'll say upstate, mostly western. The solar here is so much farther behind than a lot of states. So like you're saying, outside of Vegas, just the massive quantity of wind farms. We have a lot of smaller community solar, not that large utility scale that you're seeing out west. And so that's kind of coming into New York. And we are just completing the first utility scale farm to be in New York State with one of our larger partners. So that's really exciting. And we do a lot of the wind work in New York State. Of the people that work currently with the Wesson Group, we've touched 90% of the wind projects in New York State. So
Oh, wow.
that's really cool.
So when it comes to construction, maybe what's some of the like interesting or different things when we're instead hiring for, solar and wind farm construction versus just normal commercial?
Yeah. So, we people hear construction and just think civil engineer, right? We're looking for electrical engineers. There's a lot of components with the underground electrical that has to happen. We look for mechanical engineers. They have to do with the towers and the components that go into it. We have environmental engineers where we're building the wind farms. We take it very seriously. You'll hear us say we work and live in the same area. And so we take environmental concerns very seriously. And so we have environmental folks on staff. So it's unique because we touch and feel a lot more of the project in a lot of different arenas than just your traditional civil engineer that might work on bridges or might build roads.
Right. And so how big are you guys? How many employees you have?
Yeah, so right now we've got about 75. We do build construction in upstate New York. And so, as you can imagine, it's a little difficult in our winter months. So, we will get up to several hundred in the busy season.
Okay.
But again, it's cyclical based on the weather. So, that's
Right.
fun.
Yeah, definitely building outside in the cold New York weather would not be great, right?
Yeah, no, it's not enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. So, I mean, smaller company, I want to kind of focus on that from a culture standpoint and kind of what it's like to work for you guys. Because I'm sure that there are, especially with how much focus and subsidy in that on pushing renewable energy. I'm sure there's some giant companies in the construction space that are building some of these giant kind of wind farms or solar farms, and you guys are clearly much smaller. Like, how is it different for an employee?
Yeah, so we are unique, and you kind of said it, is that we're competing with some of these national companies, us in some cases international, and have 10,000 employees. We don't, right? And so you're, as cliche as it may sound, you're not a number here. We know everybody's name. We do work in New York State, and we hire people typically from New York State. We do have some outliers in the states surrounding us. The unique part about that is that you get to go home on the weekends, right? But also, because family is such a big deal, you can catch your kid's ball game on a Tuesday night. You're not having to catch a flight to try to do that. But we also offer a lot of the same benefits as these big companies do too. So because we compete on that level, we offer the short-term, long-term life insurance that a lot of small companies don't. We have to compete at the national level and compete, bring in the same level and caliber of employees as these bigger people do. Um, Except we have lunch and dinner together and talk about our kids, and we know our family, each other's families. And when you walk in the office, you know the kids' names because you've worked with the same team. We're not rotating teams. A lot of those bigger employers, they send who's available, right, to these project sites. So you might not know the team you're on. You know everybody you're working with here. And so actually our teamwork here is we're very team oriented because you don't want to see anyone fail because you know everybody, right? You want to make sure your team is doing well and everybody's mental health is on point and no one's struggling. And so when you can call and do check-ins with all the people on the different projects because you know them, you're cared for here differently than with a big organization. And being the director of HR, that's a big component of what I do here too, is to make sure everybody feels that. We're recreating a logo right now for what we call TWG Cares, which is our community giving committee, and they're reformatting it to look like a hug because a couple of people on the committee said they always feel like they're wrapped in hugs, even if you're on a Teams call here, and that was really cool to me. Construction, for people to say they felt like they the embrace was there, but also in that small company where we are statewide, it was, it's nice to hear from people that we're achieving that.
For sure. And I think that maybe it's probably a misconception just society wise and definitely coming out of college of like there's big name companies and working for a big giant company has certainly a positivity on your resume. Like it definitely gives you some level of like additional credibility that you work for a big giant company. But from like a day-to-day aspect, like a lot of people don't really love what that comes with, which a lot of times is a lot of red tape and a lot of meetings and probably a whole lot of middle management of people telling you what to do or the right way to do it or how it needs to be done. Not because they're doing the job, but because I guess their job is to have meetings, right? I mean, that's probably one of the one of the biggest differences besides just like the management structure and overhead of those big companies in trying to scale processes generally takes away a lot of autonomy and a lot of creativity because it's like, nope, we do it exactly this way. And you're kind of forced into that flow. And with a smaller company, I'm going to assume it's it's not that you're not doing it the right way. It's that there's like you're not just doing one little tiny part of the job and you're not being dictated from a middle management type world, correct?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head when you said management structure. We it was one of the coolest things about my job here is that I get to watch people grow. And the speed at which they grow here is so unique because we're smaller, you get to wear multiple hats, right? And you get to touch and feel more of a project, so to speak, right? You're not pigeonholed. You can do almost anything you want because there's availability to do it. And um, we have a video on our website that's great. That's all about introducing the West Wesson Group, and it starts off by saying our president says, if you're a doer, an innovator, and an overachiever, and that really is who we're looking for. And if you are that person, we have a few people here that are just their growth. They've gone from interns to project managers of $50 million projects by the time they're 30.
Oh, wow.
And if you look at people, we say it all the time to them, what I love to have the conversation about, tell me about other people you graduated with and what their roles are in their company and what their job descriptions are and what they're overseeing compared to what you're doing. And every time it's, oh yeah, no, my career has just taken off and I've been able to elevate my career and grow because like you said, those larger companies, and it's not always a bad thing, but it does take a little bit longer to be promoted and to grow. And here in a smaller company, if you're an overachiever and you're a doer and you're ready to just hit the ground running, we're not going to stop you. We actually we have our org chart like most companies do, and then we have an org chart for growth. So we can show people what their opportunities are to move up and, year 1, year 2, year 3, where they can grow and how quickly. And it's a pretty cool tool to have, especially during performance reviews, to say, here's the opportunity. What can we do to help you get there?
Well, I would imagine as a company, like while you have the ebb and flow of like winter versus summer, like trajectory wise, like your industry is growing. And as an organization, you're growing, which creates opportunities. And in small company, I think it is like also access not to the manager, but to management. Like
management in total. It's funny you say that. We have a joke here that when you start, you're going to gain the Wesson Group 15 instead of the freshman 15, like when you go to college, because we have meals together all the time, because that's where some of the lessons learned are shared. And here at the main office, in most of those meals and lunches or breakfasts, whatever it is a C-suite member or somebody from the senior leadership team. There's 12 of us on the senior leadership team of the, and so there's always 1 or 2 of us in those meals, we'll call them. And so you have access to leadership all the time. And we all want to mentor. That's one of the cool things here too, is that we prioritize that, right? We kind of have I don't call it a joke because it's not funny, but you have to backfill your role before you can get promoted. So if you're not filling it, you're not growing.
right.
And so we all have a vested interest in teaching the younger generations to fill our roles so that we can grow. And we really take pride in that.
And that's difficult for big companies to do. I mean, clearly they try to create, kind of succession planning and that type of stuff, but that's different than mentoring somebody into your role so that you can move up. That's not the same feel of like this structured, yes, we've checked down the succession planning so that if Joe quits, that we'll have somebody in his place, is not the same as we ran that same exact thing when I was running my company of like, you can give off any job you want if you can train somebody to do it. So if you want a better job, you just identify and train the person to do the job you're doing now, document it out, nail the processes so that you can move to the next thing. That's not a normal big company thing. And I think it creates like connections with the manager that handed it off to you. That's very different than a normal manager that's like in the same role, doing that same manager thing, not really moving. And like you're coming up to that, like kind of the ceiling of that area and then leaving it and going into a different area, different department, different division, which is not exactly like a great experience for the manager you left, which means maybe very difficult for them to support. Hey, my best employee wants to leave me and I'm going to have to replace them with somebody that now I'm going to have to do a lot more work with.
Mm. We talk a lot here too about accountability and responsibility and what the difference there is. And so sometimes in those larger companies, and I've been there, you'll say, oh, I passed that off, not my problem anymore. Wipe my hands of it. I grew. I'm in a different role. I'm in a different department. Here, that's not the case. You still have, yes, the responsibility lies with someone else, but we are all accountable for the company succeeding because there are a lot less of us. And
Right.
so that accountability function is a lot different. And so so interestingly, I was employee number 3. at the
Oh,
company.
wow.
And so I used to do what a lot of people here have now do, right? I was kind of the office manager, one person, and we have probably 12 or 15 that do the work now. And so, yes, I know what they each do, and but did that information flow happen? Did that transition happen seamlessly? And to be here and still say, hey, anytime you need a hand or you have a question, let me know. And it's just open communication. And so many times too in companies you'll see people hoard their role and their information, and here that's just it's not the case. We have such a free information flow and communication system. It makes a big difference when you're learning, but also when you're growing. And it makes it a lot more fun to come to work when you're not stressed about stuff like that, when you can freely ask questions.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, clearly, like, if you've worked for a company on decline, probably the least fun
Oh,
ever, right?
yeah.
The opportunities are shrinking, the roles are shrinking, the teams are shrinking, and you may have some of those where you're like, oh no, it's just a static kind of, we're not growing, but we're just like whatever. But definitely, if you want growth opportunities, getting into a smaller company where you can have a broader context of the project, not just your one little part that is on an upward trajectory, is the like perfect recipe for it. Big enough that you're like, oh no, it's stable. They've been around for a while. Their team isn't like two people,
Yeah.
but not so big that you're like, oh, there's not a lot of opportunity for this growth to impact my job, for me to move up into those roles. That I think, I mean, clearly, usually the small company HR person like you doesn't have the mic. So you're not the one
Right.
talking about the pros of that. And so instead, you end up with everything in society being tipped towards big company is better, right?
Yeah, and we hear, especially in construction, and I'll support this if people want to see it. You'll see the go go play on a mega project, right? Go work for a big company on one of these $1 billion projects so you can get that experience. Well, that's great, but do you know how many people work on those big $1 billion projects and how little of the actual scope of the project you see?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we carry not just for our staff here, but our intern program as well. We have a really unique internship program, and actually almost 80% of our interns will get a full-time offer and join us full-time,
Oh,
um,
wow.
which is really unique too. So, but it just goes to show you that we're a company, we're investing in our interns. We invest heavily in our whole staff with training and education, but we really want the younger generation to learn and to grow and to do that with us. And so we invest heavily in it. Our accountants actually often ask us if our numbers are right because it's a higher percentage of revenue, our training and education, and than they typically see. And so every year they're like, "Are you sure?" You betcha.
One, and that's, I think, also a sign of like a company that's driving their growth by lifting their teams up.
Mhm.
Because you do have the opposite, especially if you get a buyout or a huge amount of investment, or a big company is like bring in people above you that have whatever experience, versus this like, no, we're just going to grow our teams up and we'll just keep feeding, our new people, new blood into the bottom, right? To kind of, it's
Right.
very difficult to maintain amazing cultures if you're doing it the opposite way, where you're bringing people in from the
Right.
top, which almost never goes well, of like, oh, an outsider came in and is now bossing us around. That is a recipe for unhappy employees.
And the culture is just not there.
Yeah.
I I think that that's one of the things too that's so cool about our company specifically is the growth that we promote from within. And we're like I said, we're growing. We're looking to probably add 10% to our staff here in the next handful of months. And the first thing that we started talking about was who can we promote? It
Mhm.
wasn't where do we need to bring in, it's who can we grow and then what do we fill?
Yeah, and that's luckily an easy, with LinkedIn and that pretty easy way to research how companies look at growth,
Mhm.
right? Look at those people in those manager roles and just backflow. How did they get there? And you'll quickly see like, oh, look, the head of this area, the head of that area, look, they were with the company for 10 years. Look at those roles that they moved through, which is generally a good sign of like, oh, they're building their own talent base. They're like educating from within. And as an employee, it's really hard to understand if you haven't been in that situation,
Right.
right? If you're coming from big corporate, to understand how much more, inclusive that is, to not just like, hey, where we're trying to go as a company, but where I'm trying to go in a career. Like you
Yeah.
need, like your employer needs you to have career ambitions and have pathways you're working on, because they need you thinking about the next job that you would move into, not just today.
Yeah. So again, really cool things with our company. So we had our controller retired the end of June, which was great. And we wish her well, but we had we'll call it a vacancy on our senior leadership team. And so we brought up into the senior leadership team two people that are, one is now a senior project manager and one's a senior pre-construction manager. Both have been with us since 2014 and 15, respectively, and have grown from project engineer to assistant project manager to senior project manager, right? And they've grown in the company, and now both are early 30s sitting in on the senior leadership team and have grown with us since the beginning of their career. There was no question that they deserved it, right? We all knew exactly who we were getting. We are thrilled with their growth, and now we just want to backfill and who's next, right? And that's the exciting part for us, is what can we do as a senior leadership team to get the next group of people up, to replace who's retiring. So for me, that's the fun part, right? When you can identify, you're not trying to do a reduction in force. You're trying to do
Right.
how can we promote from
Right.
within, and how can we grow and develop these, I keep calling them kids and I know I need to stop doing that, but how do you do that? How do you give them the opportunities they're looking for? And I'm fortunate that our C-suite, I sit on an education and development committee, with several statewide organizations that team together to create these programs. And being part of that, the C-suite encourages it, because they're like, develop our youth. How can we do better? What can we do? And so, they give me the opportunity to sit on these committees to help with that. But what a great way for them to also, support people by allowing that. A
So
lot of companies don't have that.
yeah. So you hire a lot of interns and bring them up outside of like your main internship jobs. Like, where are a lot of the new hires coming from, as far as like bigger companies in the space, or crossing over from different commercial into more renewable energy jobs, or what does that look like?
Um, yeah, a little of both. So you'll see a lot of the bigger companies, we talked a little bit earlier about the travel required with those. A lot of people get burned out quick. It's one thing to get 5 days off a month to go home than to say, hey, it's easy to shoot home. It might be 3 or 4 hours, but you can shoot home after work on a Wednesday and you're home on the weekend. So you're home 3, 4 nights a week still. And again, we're construction in upstate New York. So you're beginning your quarter 1, right? Your January, February, March is probably a little slower. You're going to be home a little bit more and time with the family. And you're not going to have that with some of these bigger companies where you're traveling all over the state. So we do get a few people that have burned out from that big company travel, which is great because they have a lot of good experience and they can bring that to us. But also we get people who say, I've built bridges for 10 years. I'm looking for a little change, for something a little different. And I see these wind projects and they're so cool, and so we do that. We recently had a post on LinkedIn about change in industry, because we are always looking for people to come into the industry from elsewhere, additionally. And we had somebody we've actually have several communications majors that are now with us in different roles. One was in finance, one in risk management. We have our AP manager came to us from a daycare. She was with a Head Start program and then got her 4 year, started with us as an administrative assistant, went back to school, got her 4 year degree, and has grown and is now our AP manager. So it's really unique. We get to bring people in from other industries. We really hire for culture, not for background. So if you have the right attitude and we have the same belief systems, and I say belief systems, we call them our core values. I have a big sign
Right.
up. You can't see it in the back, but if you have our core values, you're a curious person. You have accountability, drive, integrity. You value continuous education, as I said. So optimism is a big one for us, right? Everybody that works here is as bubbly as I am. They're all pretty optimistic people, which is great. So if you fit those values, it's really what we're looking for to hire somebody. I can teach you construction. I can't teach you optimism, and I can't teach you integrity,
Right.
right? And so we're willing to invest in you if you're willing to put in the effort.
Well, I would imagine your first one, curiosity, is probably where you're in a new kind of emerging marketplace in solar and wind. Like, you're not, if you were only hiring people with previous experience in that, it would be pretty difficult. Like
Oh,
that
yeah.
marketplace is growing so rapidly, but the curiosity piece of like, this isn't hard to learn if you put in the reps, but more importantly, if you're curious, because it
Mhm.
is. I mean, I think you have a hard time going past a wind farm without stopping and being like, it's not moving as fast as my ceiling fan. Like, how does that even work? Like that alone of just, I remember we used to have a couple of them right next to where I lived up north. And every time it'd be like, why is it going so slow? How does this work? Like, what is the gearing down that makes that, kind of flow the right way? And solar is like different in a totally different way. Like as kids, we all had these like solar calculators, and you're like, all right, so this is just my old solar calculator, like times 40 million out here. Out in the desert here in Nevada, we've got the really interesting ones that has a big pot of water on top, and it's just mirrors that's like heating the water. And so even that, you're just like, you can literally see the energy from the sun coming off the mirrors up towards them. And I think like it's hard not to be curious when you see them, but enough curiosity that leads to, oh, I'm gonna go dig in and learn everything about this.
Yeah, I mean, most people we hire have at least some sort of background in construction, or they'll say, my father built houses, and so I like to build things and see the projects as an outcome, or there's some sort of that drive in them in the industry. But yeah, it's you know I think they're great. Again, I work for a company that does that, so it's different. But how do you not drive past a big wind farm and be like, "Oh, these things are cool,"
Or
right?
even just like the installation. I saw there was
Yeah.
a video online of some guy hanging off the side, off the top of it, like with them bringing up the giant like arms of it, and you're just like, how do they even lift that thing up there? Like, they're just this like wonder of construction abilities in our day.
Hmm.
Both of those areas I would assume has this like way different than, oh yeah, we're building houses, pretty much the same as we built houses for decades.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. You watch a crane stab some of the blades, and it's really cool to watch. And then you realize, oh, they can't do this if the wind is over so many knots, and you can't do it if the weather's not perfect. You can't. It's really a unique thing we do. And um, at the end of the day, too, I get to drive by them and look at my kids and say, "Hey guys, like Mama's company helped build these. How cool is that?"
yeah, very tangible output, right?
Yeah,
And probably different than that. We built that house over there.
a little different. I mean, I worked for a bridge company as an intern, and so every time we drive over those bridges, I hold my breath a little bit, knowing that that's why I'm in HR now. But it's still really cool to be able to say, like, this is where I went to work and what I did, and now look at it be here.
So your interns, they're coming out of college campuses, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
Like, where are those, mostly around like that local area in New York, or where do you guys pull from?
Yeah, so actually, probably 30% of our full-time employees here are from Clarkson University. So we have a great relationship with Clarkson, go Golden Knights. And so we do a lot with them. We pull from the four-year SUNY school. So we recruit from Alfred State. We recruit from Utica University. We're recruiting from this year, we're going to go to Penn State. because we're expanding into Southern New York and down into Pennsylvania. So we're always looking for new opportunities in colleges. We certainly, I have open job opportunities for interns year round. We love people that come from backgrounds we're not used to, or educations, I should say, we're not used to, right? That are, anybody that's not Clarkson. We love that. We're
Well,
wide
like
open
you said,
here.
what, 80% placement rate post internship, right?
Yes. Yep.
So I would imagine that that impacts a lot of things. Number one, clearly you guys have a selection process for identifying people to fit your culture, because it's not just like, hey, they end up awesome. It's also that they want to stay at your smaller organization.
Yeah. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're an intern, you're junior level, you're a senior leader. We're going to treat you right. And that's the biggest thing that we talk about here is, it's the age old thing, the age old issue. If you train them and they leave, did you waste money? Or if they stay and you didn't, what's we're going to train, we're going to invest, we are going to develop, and we hope you stay. But if you don't, that's on us. We
Right.
did that. Right. But at the same time, there's going to be situations, there is healthy turnover. And part of construction, especially on these projects, is we do travel throughout New York State, and once in a while we'll hire some local people. And we just finished, we a couple years ago finished a project in Jefferson County in New York, and we had a foreman that was there, and his wife had had two kids while we were on the project, and he chose to stay and work with the owner of the project and live in town and be there for his family. And we trained him so that he could have that role with the company that hired him. But
Right.
guess what? He gets to be with his kids every day. And so,
Right.
how do you get upset about things like that, right? Like, we say family first, and that's what we mean, because we couldn't have been more proud of him for making that decision.
I think that's probably a not just measurement, but like evidence of a great culture that will sustain itself. It doesn't make sense, but like how you as a management team and as a company deal with good turnover, right? Good turnover meaning you wish they'd stayed, not bad turnover like you throw
Right.
a party after they leave.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
you
Healthy turnover.
yeah, how you deal with good turnover when great employees leave because they want a different opportunity, and how you kind of like support that ripples back through your company with this like, oh no, they really mean what they say. They really do care about our career growth, even when that leaves us or heads us out away from it. I think is a super positive thing that's very difficult to measure, but
Mhm.
it's usually like a management team belief system where they're like, no, no, we're going to treat people the right way. Even if they leave us, they'll come back around in the future potentially, or we would always
Exactly.
get tons of referrals from our past employees.
Hmm.
And again, another measurement when past employees refer to the company, meaning, oh, that's a great place to start, or oh, that's a great place if you're looking for X, Y, and Z. That's what treating people who leave with respect and the same as you treat them if they stayed. That's what you end up with. Probably the most powerful referral is somebody who left there but refers somebody back.
Yeah. So last year we were hiring for a senior level safety manager, and we were right at the end of the process, and we pitched the offer. And he called me and he said, I reached out to, and he named the person whose spot he was filling. And it was, again, healthy turnover. The gentleman just was going closer to home, but still, it's, as an HR person, you're always like, oh gosh, right? And he said, the gentleman that we ended up hiring said, he loved the organization, had nothing but great things to say, and he left to be closer to his family. And I was like, yeah, well, that's true. I'm glad that's what came out, but same exact thing, right? And this gentleman's been here for a year and a half, and we do the same thing, you know, as much as I want to hire quickly a lot of times, right? I want to fill a role and say, hey, let's go. I want to get you trained and onboarded. If someone asks for an extra week to make a decision, we're going to say yes every single time, because I want you to choose us. I want you to want to be here. I don't want somebody to come to work for me that says, oh, I should have gone somewhere else, and 6 months later they leave, right?
Right.
I want you bought into your decision. And so Yes, can it be a little frustrating sometimes because you need to fill a role? You bet. But is that 1 week really going to make a big difference in the long run, especially if this turns into an employee that you retain for 5 to 7, 10 years? Right? So we do that too on the front end. It's not just the back end. You
Yeah,
have
and
to treat people with respect. Sometimes when they rush, people say, "No, I need a response now." I don't know if I want to work there.
I think that lends itself once again to smaller organizations where it's like
Right.
we have the ability to be more flexible with these things because we're smaller. We can figure out how we flex around, like policies are more like some of these are guidelines, not hard policies. And in big corporate, a lot of times you're like, I don't know that that policy makes sense all the time, but it's executed with precision every time. And so
Yeah.
good job. We checked off the policy, but we harmed, our employee, our relationship, or especially in those beginning days of like, we harmed the beginning of our relationship because this was so strict. I think I just want to touch on this as we're ending internships. I think an interesting thing of that percentage placement, if I'm an intern, that's probably one of my leading questions. What
Mhm.
percent of interns actually stay long term? But what I'm looking for isn't what are my chances of getting the job? And some of the others, bigger companies may actually be like, oh, a very small percent. This is a very competitive thing, right? And so you're trying to read between the lines of that number, though, of saying, okay, so if it's 50, 60, 70%, it most likely won't be as crazy competitive amongst my peers who are interns, right? The higher that number, the less competition. I think, although we'd love to say, oh, we invest in our interns no matter what, from a manager standpoint, the higher that number, the more they feel good about investing because they haven't been burned as many times on training somebody who bailed at the end of the internship. And so that number does matter, not because of its precision of it, but because of like what it means behind the scenes of, oh, this is going to be a non-competitive internship. I'm not like, this isn't like I'm getting voted off the island by my peers. And from
Right.
a manager standpoint, I'm going to end up with managers training me who the numbers say they feel good that their effort's going to be worth it. You're going to stick around. And those are probably the intangibles of what that number means, right?
Yeah, it's yes, it's a little more competitive to get the job, but once you do, we start you off with an intern class and there's anywhere from 4 to 10 depending on the year, right? We're going to make sure that you have a successful internship and that means that you have work to do. It's not pushing papers, it's not just coming in and sitting around, right? And saying, "Oh, I'm an intern at a big company and this is a great thing." We treat you like an employee. You're going to have work to do and we expect you to perform. We're going to ask away, ask all the questions, and we're going to guide you and lead you, but you're going to come be part of the team. And that's something that a lot of our interns say is, and we also hire people more sophomore year to give them more opportunity, right? So you get 2 or 3 summers with us, not just one. And so you're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing you. And if we're not a great fit, that's wonderful. We had a couple years ago a girl that interned with us that was phenomenal. We got along great. She did great work. The internship was in every metric a success, except the fact that she didn't love self-perform work. She wanted to go and teach. And she learned that through the internship. So guess what? Again, a successful internship because she learned what she wanted to do.
Right.
And so some people will say, well, she didn't come back full time. She's not in that 80%. You're right. But she found a career she loves because she worked here and we gave her the opportunity to see different parts of it. She was like, oh, I don't think I like this. Can I try something else? Absolutely. Oh, I don't think I like this. And by the end of the internship, she's like, I like you guys, but not what you're doing. Awesome. Great. That's what it's there for.
Right. And that probably again lends back to the smaller company of I don't like this implies like, hey, I had access to
Right.
variation of work and the ability to see beyond just my little tiny slice of what we do gives you that ability to go, oh, it's not that I hate this work. I don't want this job. I want the one next to it or the one 3 hops away from it that would be very hard to migrate to or even experience at a giant corporation.
It's funny, and I know your listeners won't see this, but this is a growth track chart that I've been working on with our operations team. And you start down here as a field engineer and intern, and here's all the tracks that you can take, and we all have this at our desks. We all talk about it, we use it, we show it. Look at all the different opportunities. If you don't love the environmental role you were hired for, all right, so let's put you on a road crew and see if you like the civil component. No, you don't like that? All right, well, let's see if you like pouring foundations, right?
Right.
Like, you're a great person with a great attitude. Let's put the right person in the right seat and not just put a butt in a seat. That's not what we're here for. And so that's another opportunity as a smaller company that we have is if you're the right person, then we'll find you the right role.
Right. Well, I love it. I love everything about it. Thanks so much, Ashley. I think this really is kind of the advertisement for, like, don't discount the small, mid-sized competitor. It's not that they have weaknesses versus strengths. They just have different strengths. Like,
Exactly.
it's just two different environments. And as a job seeker, honestly, for us, we give a lot of job seeker advice, and it's like, hey, pick the company, then the role, not the opposite way around. When you go to a search engine and search for a job, you're picking the title and
Right.
then seeing what companies are available there. But in this instance, like, job seekers would be a lot better off picking the company first, of going, I like their values. I like the environment. I like the way that they are looking at career growth, or the way that they're giving access to variation of things. Because once you get down the application pipeline and suddenly you're so zoomed in on pay and benefits,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to not feel like momentum towards it, and makes it really hard to be like, wait a second, I think that company is not a fit for what
Right.
I want to do. And the assumption is, well, I can just go there and put my head down, I'll do my job and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, this is most of your waking hours.
Yeah. You spend 40 hours, 40 plus, right? With these people, you want to enjoy where you go to work. And that's
Mhm.
the thing is, here you're not going to put your head down and get away with it, right? We're going to get over there, and I'm going to say, who are you? What are you doing? What do you enjoy? Tell me about your life. So,
Well, this was
that's
amazing, Ashley. Thank you
no,
so much for your
great.
time. We will include in the description, there'll be a link to their website, a link to where their careers are at. I know I was just looking at, I think there's 8 to 10 jobs open there, lots of internship opportunities available. And so go check them out. But once again, Ashley, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
So that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of our podcast. So I told you if you stuck around to the end, I would give you some ideas of what we're all about and how I can help you. So number one, if you want to get job alerts from Refer, go over to Refer.io, Refer.io, and sign up for job alerts. You'll receive our newsletter, you'll receive job alerts, career advice, job seeker advice, etc. Number two, we've got some really cool AI tools over there. In fact, an entire studio of AI tools built just for job seekers to help you identify your career path, brainstorm what your options are, figure out how to set up job alerts, rewrite your resume, prepare for interviews, everything, all the way up to the point of helping you actually build your own mentors to help mentor you as a new hire at your new job. So go check out our AI tools. Trust me, you will love them. And along with those tools comes access to our coaching community, where we actually coach you on how to get a better job, how to improve your chances of getting a job, how to do better at your job, and everything in between. Now, lastly, if you're an employer and you say, hey, we're a great place to work, but we don't get enough applicants, our employees love working for us, but for whatever reason, we don't get that many qualified people. They're not that excited. Most likely, you just are not very good at communicating why you're a great place to work out into the world via your job ads, via job boards. You may not be that great at getting your employees to amplify that message out there. And we're here to help. So if you want some help, if you want to be on our podcast, I would love to interview you. I'd love to show you what I would do if I was you to amplify your employer brand out there into the job seeker market. So shoot me an email, ryank@refer.io. You'll see it on the screen, and we'd love to chat. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.